Jesuits have been making a big deal about an alleged restraining order that they claim Brent brought against me in January 1994. I would like to explain how this came about. First of all, I'm going to read Brent's letter about this. This was written on, let's see, today is the August the 29th. Dear Gail, wow, that's insane. I've never even been to Reddit. There's a Brent fake up at Reddit. It's his clone, actually. I just looked into this and found out that the Jesuits have just uploaded a video of my clone to their YouTube channel as well. I suspect this has everything to do with the movie you are making. I have a movie up at my website at gabrielchana.com/church.html, gabriellechana.com/church.html. It's making us look far too credible. As a precaution, I would be very careful about any strange emails or messages you might receive during this time. I'm sure you know what to do. I care for your safety. I think it would be a wonderful idea. I asked him about making a video about this, how this restraining order came about. I think it would be a wonderful idea to make a video about what happened in the 90s when Paramount Studios sent you that letter saying to never write me again. I think you should start back from the beginning with your son and the social worker you talked to, and how your ex later ignited the situation by writing a nasty letter to the studio. The story is an emotionally moving one, and to be honest, I don't think there's much more I can add, especially since our current state of affairs speaks for itself. I'm still writing to you. It was Paramount Studios and not I that sent you the letter. As you noticed, I didn't even sign my name. The studio acted on my behalf without my permission in an attempt to keep our love apart. You already know full well how deep they were willing to go when they allowed Laurie McBride to enter the studio and repeatedly rape me. And that's what my movie's about. It's about how she repeatedly raped him. It was indeed I, my darling, who made love to you with sweet longings over the phone, caressing you with my voice as your written words caressed my soul. Your husband, Brent Spiner. I'm going to explain to you the real reason why I got this letter from Paramount Studios. It was my ex-husband. He's the reason it happened. My son was in the hospital for asthma and pneumonia in July 1993. And at this time, I was writing Brent at least once a week, probably several times a week, and sharing all of my life with him. And he liked it. He let me know by these rings that I got on my phone. Sometimes it'd be wrong number. Sometimes he spoke to me. But usually he didn't, because he had to be careful because I was married. But he let me know he liked it. So for him to be quiet for 2 weeks when I usually heard from him just about every day, he would like call up and do wrong numbers, or sometimes he'd talk to me, or he's put Gates McFadden and LeVar Burton on the phone at times. I recognize their voices. You might say, well, Marina Sirtis made a comment in here. I'm not going to comment about Marina Sirtis. From what I understand, she's actually very upset right now that she said what she did. Brent likes all of his co-stars, but he's especially opened up to LeVar Burton, and I believe Gates McFadden. And not that he dislikes any of his co-stars, but some of them he's really close to. He's really close to LeVar Burton. Anyways, I'm getting off the subject. So he was quiet for 2 weeks. Brent has always been the most supportive, positive, sensitive, deep, sensual, and intelligent man. And he had a tenor voice like velvet when he spoke to me on the phone to make love to me. And it was an exact match to his voice in Old Yellow Eyes' Back. That's how I figured out it was him. And when I listened to him, the longings in his voice, it sounded like I was his dream woman. You might say, well, why didn't you actually go to bed with him then? Well, in 1991, he did proposition me, and he asked if he could come over. And I had to turn him down because I was married, and I've read at that time, I'd read the King James Bible from Genesis to Revelation from cover to cover probably about 30 times. And with a background like that, it wasn't easy for me to sin with Brent Spiner. I didn't want to lose my special relationship with my Lord Jesus Christ. So I turned him down, but I said, Brent, I have to turn you down because this goes against my Christian convictions, my Bible convictions. But I want you to know that I do love you. And what I'd like to do is maintain the relationship long distance, and for us to establish emotional and spiritual and intellectual intimacy. And I'm going to try to make it up to you that I can't give you the physical intimacy that I wish I could give you. And I let him know that. And I felt kind of guilty about letting him know that because I was married at the time. But yet, I sensed when I went to the Lord in prayer that the Lord didn't mind the way that I wanted to have a relationship with Brent. In fact, we had a revival services at my church, and I recall during the revival that when I would pray and ask the Lord to answer the prayers of the sinner and have results at the service, that all of a sudden when I would pray, people would just start going down the aisle to get right with God. And I was just so boggled by that. I thought, man, Lord, I'm this adulterous sinner. I dream about making love to Brent every day. And I'm married, and yet I can pray in a revival. And it was a real revival. It was the Holy Spirit answering my prayer. And God seemed to approve of my relationship with Brent Spiner. But he did make one thing clear to me during the revival. He said, Gail, when I went to him in prayer and Bible study, he said, the reason I approve of your love for Brent is because you really love him, Gail. And he really loves you. He said, I do not approve of the adultery. He said, and the Lord made it very clear to me. During the revival, he spoke to me. I'm not a literal voice, but like the still small voice when you go to him in prayer and thoughts come in your mind and they're from the Lord. Or you read the Bible and a passage leaps out at you and the Lord's trying to show you something. Or you hear a message in the church service and the Lord's trying to tell you something. Well, the combination of all those factors, the Lord told me this. He said, Gail, the love that you have for this man and the love he has for you is so unusual. It's like a monument. And he told me the average couple that have gone through what you and Brent have gone through the relationship would have totally disintegrated. He said, he told me because what you have is so special and so high and a love that just reaches up into the heavens. He says, I'm going to make an exception for you. He says, the Lord said, I want you to continue your correspondence with Brent Spiner. He needs you. And the Lord told me to continue. He said, you are under divine orders, Gail, to continue to write and encourage this man. He said, but do not commit adultery. He said, I like your idea of having a spiritual, intellectual, emotional intimacy with him through your correspondence, but do not cross the line into physical adultery because that I will not honor. And so that's how I conducted my relationship with Brent. Because I really had to beat it out with God because I said, Lord, why have you put such an awesome love in my heart for this man that I know is a love from the heavens itself? And yet I can't have him or it'd be adultery. And I battled it out with God, and I cried and I said, I don't understand, God. Why? You've allowed this to happen to me. And I was married to a man who making love to him was like kissing the wall. And Brent was the total opposite. So now Brent was giving me 2 weeks of silence in July 93. And I thought, oh no, I'm getting a repeat of September 1992. And I was getting worried. I thought, you see, in September 1992, at the time of my birthday, September 15th, he was really quiet. And I thought he was saying goodbye. And I thought, oh, it's because I didn't encourage him. And he's given up and he just doesn't want to have a woman who only wants to have a spiritual, intellectual, and emotional long-distance relationship and won't cross it over into the physical. So I thought, And I was so heartbroken because I had achieved a real emotional, intellectual intimacy with Brent. We we actually developed a real emotional oneness so that he actually became like my arms and my legs. And I believe he felt the same way about me. Well, anyways, after the 3 weeks, then Brent called me back. And he never told me why he was quiet that 3 weeks. I found out later it was Lori McBride. She was repeatedly raping him during that time. But I wouldn't know this till years and years later because he wouldn't talk to me about this stuff. So anyways, I was getting a repeat of the silence in July 1993 for 2 weeks. Nothing on my phone. And I was getting worried about him. And at the same time, my son was in the hospital for asthma and pneumonia. The Jesuits always would work at that whenever I had a crisis in my life, they'd make sure Brent wasn't there to make him appear like a deserter. And I didn't know it at the time, but Lori McBride had tied Brent Spiner up in his basement at his own house. And she was torturing him using very futuristic technology while he was in the basement. And I plan on making a movie about this. The Jesuits use this futuristic technology on purpose because they know if I tell you what they did to Brent, they can write me off as crazy. They're not stupid. They're not going to torture him using believable methods because that'll make them look bad. It'll make them look like the beasts that they are, the monsters that they are. So they use futuristic technology so that if I dare to expose what they did, they can say, oh, that woman is crazy. But people know that no such technology exists. You said, give us an example of the technology. Well, I'm kind of reluctant to divulge it here unless I can explain it better. But it would be stuff like electro-ejaculator. The Jesuits are such perverts, but that's all I want to say on that. I'll go into that later. They use futuristic technology on purpose so that they can discredit anybody who tries to expose them. They're super geniuses, like the devil they serve. Oh, another thing, I'm studying acting right now because I'm making movies about on my own. I'm producing, directing, and acting and writing in my own movies, and I like doing it myself because if I go Hollywood, I know there will be restrictions. Because you can't expose the Jesuits in Hollywood and not have them raise hell. So the only way I can tell the truth about them is I have to do my own production. So that's the way I'm doing it. And I'm making movies that tell the story about myself and my men. And a lot of them are celebrities. And this is actually very courageous of me. But then I am a courageous woman. I have a tendency to take on ambitious projects that are way over my head with very little training, and I do remarkably well. But the Jesuits take advantage of my courage to make me appear crazy. For instance, I wrote a teleplay named Law in 1992, and at that time, I was only a 1-month-old writer. But I did this in 1992 because I felt so bad that I couldn't give Brent Spiner my body, and I tried to make up for it with my writing, by just using words with him to make love to him with words. That's why Brent said that my written words caressed his soul. Apparently it worked, and Brent has the intelligence to appreciate this type of lovemaking. He's not a shallow man. And the Jesuits have ripped up that teleplay that I wrote in 1992 when I was only a 1-month-old writer, saying how Mary Sue the plot is, and that the storyline is stupid and all this. Hey, Jesuits, give me a break. I was only a 1-month-old writer at the time. When you consider that I was only a 1-month-old writer, it's incredible. It's miraculous. The characterizations, the dialogue. I look back and I read it. I don't think it's quite as bad as the Jesuits say, but they got to make me appear like I'm crazy. So they're hiring their agents to go in there and act like they're legitimate reviewers of my writings to create the impression that I'm a paranoid schizophrenic. I was only a 1-month-old writer. You guys, when you go and read Law, remember that, okay? I wrote that as a labor of love for Brent because I wanted to make it up to him that I wouldn't give him my body and that I was only going to be a spiritual lover to him. So I tried to write a masterpiece. For a 1-month-old writer at the time, and that, I mean, totally green writer, that teleplay is nothing short of miraculous. It is very hard to write a good screenplay. So all I can say is I wonder if you all would do so well if you were just a 1-month-old writer without cheating and doing it all being your own work, which is what I did. Yeah, give me a break. For a 1-month-old writer, it's miraculous. When I make up my mind to do stuff and take on some of these ambitious projects like this movie I'm making, I am very creative, and it's amazing how fast I can catch on. Like right now, I'm doing my own acting in this movie, and I've never been to acting school, never been to theater school. So how can you do this if you've never studied acting? I'm studying acting on my own. I'm going online and studying videos by like Uta Hagen and Michael Caine. I watch some of his. I go to YouTube, and then I'm actually ordering some books from Amazon.com. I just got one here called goodness, by Stanislavski. He's my favorite method because because of my writing background, it's easier for me to get into character using the Stanislavski method. So I'm ordering writing books and reading them. Not writing books, acting books. I'm teaching myself how to act using the same principles that I use to teach myself how to write. So I go in there and do actual work on acting projects, and while I'm reading acting textbooks, with the same textbooks that they often use in acting school, and reading that to give myself ideas on how to how to improve my performances. And then I'm also watching video classes that I found online that are free. And between all that, I'm fine-tuning my performance by watching myself act and then critiquing my own performance and then going back in and doing it again and making it better. That's how I taught myself how to write. Though I'm also a graduate of the Institute of Children's Literature, but the Institute of Children's Literature was a 2-year correspondence school, and it didn't really give me enough training to write like what I did with Silver Skies, which I think is pretty respectable. So all I can say is, the Jesuits like to pick everything apart that I do, but when you consider that a lot of times I'll take on projects when I'm totally green at them, and I do amazingly well for being so green. My men discovered when they went to Church of Gail, there was an IQ machine there, and according to that machine, my intelligence is so high it broke the machine just about. I've got the highest IQ of any woman on the planet. I'm having a hard time believing it, but when I look back at my life, I can see that's possible. For instance, for the past several years, I've been studying 5 languages all at the same time. You say 5? Yeah. Russian, Japanese, German, Italian, Spanish, all at the same time. 5 languages. It's no wonder I'm not fluent in any of them. When I made up my mind to study Italian because Franco Nero was in my life, I became half fluent within 3 months. Within 3 months, half fluent in Italian. And when I was sitting at a doctor's office and a guy came to me and started speaking to me in Italian, he said, "You know what?" He says, "I can tell from listening to you." He was fluent in Italian. He said, "If you went to Italy, you would be fluent in a month." He was probably right. Of course, I lost my language books and I forgot a lot of my Italian, but that was back in 1998. I was doing that because Franco Nero was in my life. I'm a pretty smart woman. And when Jesus spoke to us on Skype, he never meets me directly. He does it, and what he'll do is he'll show up when Brent's speaking to me during Skype, and then he'll show up and then Brent will type what he says. When Jesus speaks to me through Skype, I asked him about this. I said, "Jesus, am I really that smart?" And Jesus said, "When they ran that IQ test on you, you just about broke the machine. Your IQ was so high." I said, "I'm having a hard time believing this, Jesus." Well, Jesus said, "It's true, Gail." He says, "You're a pretty smart woman." In fact, some stuff that I tell him, I'm not going to mention this, but I mentioned something that I learned from the Bible. I said, "Jesus, did you make appearances in 2012 because of something?" I'm not going to talk about it because Jesus told me to keep quiet about it. But it was something that I figured out using my knowledge of Scripture and numbers. And I said, Jesus said, "Boy, you're pretty smart. I wasn't supposed to tell anybody that." He says about why he's all of a sudden making appearances in 2012 and he waited till 2012. He says, you said, "Well, tell us what it is." But I said, "Nope, Jesus don't want me to talk about it, so I'm not going to. Unless he changes his mind and gives me permission." I've learned to respect him. and honor his wishes because he has reasons. Anyways, so Brent was giving me 2 weeks of silence in July 1993. A physician, the pediatrician for my son in the hospital, noticed that I looked kind of stressed out. So she recommended that I go see the social worker. I thought they were going overboard, but I guess they thought I was neglecting my son because I was stressed out. Because I was a little stressed out because Brent was giving me silence while my son was at the hospital. So I was worried about Brent and my son at the same time. I figured they were both in trouble, and I was right. So when I went to see the social worker, he got me to admit that I had I approached him like this. I'll say, I promise. I can tell you one of the reasons why I'm kind of stressed out. But I'll only tell you, I said, if you promise you won't tell my husband or anybody about this under strict confidentiality. She says, other than that, I won't say it. And he said, oh, I promise I won't talk about it. So I admitted to him that I had a long-distance communication with Brent Spiner, and that I'd been writing him for years. And he promised he'd be confidential about it, but he lied. Because you know what happened? I told very few people back in 1993 that I had a communication with Brent Spiner. I think the only people I told was my sister, and I briefly mentioned him. And that was in September 92 when I was upset over his silence. And I recall she said, you must really care for this guy. The way she's acting now, I'm wondering if she even remembers that stuff. And then the other time was a woman at my church, and that was it. I didn't tell anybody. I can really keep my mouth shut when I make up my mind. That's because I was married, and I didn't want Brent to get in trouble because he made love to me on the phone. So I was trying to protect him. So this guy betrayed me. I wouldn't have even told him about Brent if I'd known that he would do this. He actually wrote a written statement which got submitted to my health insurance, and then in that statement he claimed that I said I had a relationship with a Star Trek character, and he was insinuating that I had a mental illness because I believe this. See, that's the problem with me having a relationship with a celebrity, because it's so unlikely that a celebrity would fall in love with one of his fans and write her a letter. The Jesuits are playing up on this to the hilt. My relationship with Brent is so unusual that it's hard to believe. And the Jesuits are taking full advantage of this to try to destroy it. And it's been quite effective. It has convinced some people out there that are a little bit more on the stupid side, You say, what do you mean? Because the Jesuits have tricked you, so you're stupid. You're obviously not as smart as me and Brent. You don't even realize what they did in World War II. Anyways, I'm getting off the subject. Anyway, so the health insurance paperwork leaked it. And my husband got that paperwork in the mail in November 93. He boomed at me. He demanded that I come over to the dinner table. He says, what is this? He says, it says here that you've been writing Brent Spiner love letters and that you say you're in love with him. I never used the word that I was in love with him, with that social worker. So he kind of added some stuff in and decided to embellish it, which I don't appreciate, because that's what my ex-husband read. And he says, I'm going to divorce you right now if you write this man one more letter. And he said, and I demand to have his address. So I figured under threat of divorce, I had to give him, my ex, this address. And then I had to watch him write a letter to Brent in which he said he was going to give him bad press. And it was very insulting. It was very insulting. I was so ashamed of my ex. And then I thought, what a small, vicious, jealous person. So opposite Brent Spiner. And so that got mailed to Brent. That's the real reason I got the letter. Anyways, you know what? That was at the end of November. I didn't want to give him Brent's address. It was his Paramount Studios address, because Brent wouldn't give me his home address because there were too many complications going on in his life, and on my side too, because I was married. But you know what was really strange? In early December, about a week after my husband wrote that nasty letter to Brent and to Paramount, I was vacuuming in my Linwood, Washington apartment, and we lived on the first floor. And my son came to me and whispered and said, Mommy, somebody just came to the door and whispered your name. I looked at the people, There was nobody there. I went to my son's room and looked out his window, and I saw a sparkling white truck out there. And I looked inside, and this very handsome man wearing a dark wig and a mustache flashed his lights on and off so I could see him in the truck. I thought, oh my God, that's Brent Spiner. He came to my apartment wearing a wig. I think he was playing in a play at that time called Every Good Boy Deserves a Favor. He came to my apartment, flashed the lights on and off in his truck, and I thought, oh my! And then he backed the truck up really fast and zoomed out like a torpedo and left the parking lot. I couldn't read his tag or anything. Not that I was trying to. That was a week after my husband wrote that nasty letter to Paramount. I guess Brent was trying to make some repairs to our relationship after what my husband did. And then I'd say about January the 12th, my FedEx came to our door, and my husband picked up this FedEx package, and inside was a letter from Paramount Studios. And he said, Gail, I want you to read this. He pulled me over. He said, we just got this. And I read the letter. He gave it to me. And the letter was written by a woman attorney, a Paramount woman attorney, who claimed to represent Brent Spiner. And she said that I was forbidden to ever contact in any manner me or any of my family members, Brent Spiner, that he never, ever communicated with me beyond an autograph photo, that he never talked to me or anything like that. It was full of lies. And Brent did not sign the letter. But I was very upset by that letter because, well, for one thing, because I knew it wasn't true. And it made me feel like Brent was a coward, that he called me and made love to me in 91 and 92, and now he didn't have the courage to be true to his heart. So I prayed to God for 3 hours, crying and begging God to forgive me, because here I was, a woman who read the Bible through from cover to cover, and I compromised my convictions and risked the streets to courageously write this letter because God seemed to tell me in a revival that he wanted me to encourage this man, and look what happened. I said, Lord, I don't understand. And I said, I've really let you down, Jesus. I said, I'm so sorry, Lord. I'm so sorry that I disgraced your great name by having an adulterous relationship with a man who was not worthy of my heart or of what you told me to do. And I just prayed for 3 hours, and I asked God to forgive me. I said, I'll never write him again, Lord. I'll never disgrace you. I claim to be one of your child. I'm a born-again Christian. I read the Bible. I go to church. And at that time, I was a regular church attender. I don't go to church right now, except for, unless you want to consider my communications with Brent Spiner Church. I guess it is. It's sort of like a fellowship because he's a born-again Christian now. Getting off the subject, for 3 hours I prayed, and then I quit. I said, okay, Lord, what more can I say? And then 12 hours later, I was outside, and my son came up to me and says, Mommy, did you hear the news? I said, what? An earthquake just hit Southern California. I said, oh, that was like 12 hours after my 3-hour prayer. I went into my apartment, and I couldn't believe it. And I listened to the news, and I thought, oh my God, Jesus answered my prayer. The Northridge earthquake. And it did hit Paramount Studios too. And what was funny was right in the middle of the earthquake, Brent called me. And I picked up the phone, and I heard these noises like beep, 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 beep. I thought, oh my God, that's Brent Spiner. He's found a way to work around that letter. He found a way to keep up his communications with me where I didn't have to write him in order for him to hear my thoughts. And I figured out that he'd wiretap my phone. He was making these noises to let me know that he still wanted to hear from me, but this time not through letters, but all I had to do was pick up my phone, dial my own number, and I got a blank, and there would be Brent at the other end listening to me. And I could tell he was listening to me because I would talk to him and hear like, I thought, oh, hi, Brent. Oh, wow, clever. So, and I thought that he sent that letter from the Paramount Studios attorney on purpose so that he could wiretap my phone, I guess get legal permission to wiretap my phone, so I wouldn't have to get in trouble with my husband by writing letters to him. So I thought, oh, how clever Brent is. Now I don't have to write letters to him anymore, and I can just pick up my phone and talk to him. So I never did write him any more letters after that. I didn't have to. I could just pick up my phone, dial my own number, get a blank, and talk on the phone to him. Another reason I didn't write any more letters to him at Paramount was when I went to church, it seemed like every service the preachers would preach this message. And I could tell the Lord was speaking to me again. He was using a combination of messages at church, Bible study, and prayer. And the Lord was saying, Gail, you must never, ever write a letter to Paramount again. I do not want you to write them. And so I decided I didn't. I always try to obey Jesus. I complain a lot to him because I think he's slow. And I don't like it. All these bad people get away with all these horrible things. And I call him, I say, you're a big Santa Claus, Jesus. You're just up there and letting these horrible Jesuits get away with everything. Why don't you just beat them up right now and get it over with? And I have to admit, I'm not very patient. And sometimes I tell Jesus to hike it, but Jesus knows my heart. I may be a complainer, but I am a mover. And when he tells me to do something, I obey him. Most of the time. But then which one of us is perfect? I'm a lot better than King Saul. I'm a lot more like King David, my ancestor. So anyways, the Lord answered that prayer. And I just thought, wow, I can't believe the Lord answered my prayer like that, this adulterous sinner. And I was actually guilty of lying a little bit. Because when my husband asked me if I was writing Brent Spiner, I lied and said that I was not writing him when I was actually writing him indirectly through Gates McFadden. But anyways, the Jesuits put a stop to that. And then the Lord just worked around it by letting me communicate with Brent through the wiretap on the phone. So I thought, wow, I always knew Jesus approved of my relationship with Brent, but I didn't know why, So that's what really happened, folks. I never harassed Brent. He wanted to hear from me. He was making love to me on the phone. I think he was quite upset that I got that letter from that Paramount Studios attorney. But I misunderstood Brent at the time. I didn't even know he had Lori McBride. I didn't know about her till December '96. And what was really funny, when I read the paper the next day, I checked to see who died in that earthquake. And it seemed to me that the only Hollywood people who died worked at Paramount Studios. I thought, oh boy, that's interesting. Of course, you'll never hear about that from the Jesuits. They'll make sure to cover all that up. They don't want to admit that God Almighty sent that earthquake in judgment against them, because he knew that they were the reason that I got that letter. That was a Jesuit lawyer. I'm certain of it. They were behind all that crap. The Jesuits are the reason I got the restraining order. That was not Brent Spiner. That was the Jesuits. And maybe Lori McBride, who the Jesuits used to interfere with Brent's love for me. I came first. She came second. And Brent wanted me, and then she butted her way in order to break us up. And that is the truth. I was first, man. And she's never, ever been able to remove me from Brent Spiner's heart. She lies and tries to pretend like she lies to the world. And you say, well, look at her online. She looks like such a nice lady. I asked Brent about that. I said, Brent, why one of the reasons where a lot of people think I'm crazy is you look online and you look at Lori McBride's pictures. She doesn't look like the lunatic that you say she is, doing these crazy sexual crimes against you and fisting your rear when she makes love to you. She would actually slap Brent's rear when she was raping him and drug raping him, and she injured him so that he required stitches in his rectum. I mean, she's a criminal. And I said, you don't see that. I said, Brent, I said, are any of those photos accurate where she looks like a nice person? Brent said, nope, none of them are accurate. He said, the only accurate photos of her are the ones where she looks mean and like a bitch. He said, she's a bitch. And any photos where she looks nice, they've been doctored up. I said, what about the photos where you and her appeared together at certain functions? I said, were you there at those functions? He said, some of them. He said, but they've all been doctored up to make me look like a playboy and make her look like she was nice and make us look like we're compatible with each other. Okay. So you haven't talked about this video about this Brent who claims he never. Well, I'm getting there. Okay. Brent and I have always had a positive, nurturing relationship. He would never, ever, if to be honest with you, if there was anybody he'd want to put a restraining order on, it would be Laurie McBride. But he was terrified by her. And if you see my movie, you'll see why. That movie's she drug raped him, and she almost killed him. In fact, what's really funny, during the Quebec trial, if you want to see what the real Laurie McBride is like, go to Terrance Jenkins' YouTube channel, TerranceJenkins, and listen to the real Laurie McBride. And what's really freaky is right in the middle of the trial, we had to execute one of the Laurie McBride clones because she started setting people on fire in the courtroom. See, that's the thing. The Jesuits do such wild things. They know it's hard for people to believe, and they're trying to say that I'm stupid and gullible, that the whole thing was a big theatrical performance. No, it wasn't. That trial really took place, man. I've got super genius intelligence, man. The ones who are duped are you guys, man. The Jesuits know how hard it is to believe all this stuff, and they're taking full advantage of it so that everybody will, believe what appears normal. Well, I got news for you. What appears normal is a falsehood. The truth is the stuff that's hard to believe, but it's true. You say, well, how do you know it's true? I'm using logic. I've noticed inconsistencies in what the Jesuits say. There's so many inconsistencies. Most of you that think that I'm full of baloney and that I don't know what I'm talking about, you're either a Jesuit yourself and you're lying, or you are a victim of Jesuit brain control technology, which is really, really brilliant. But there are so many inconsistencies in the Jesuit statements and what they say that anybody with half a brain can figure out that they're lying. And as crazy as I may be, there are no inconsistencies in what I say. That should tell you something right there, folks. There are too many inconsistencies in what the Jesuits say. There are not inconsistencies in what I say. I'm consistent because I'm telling the truth. Anyways, Brent and I always had a positive, nurturing relationship, and I never came across to him as somebody who would harm him. Laurie McBride actually literally did physically damage Brent on several occasions. In fact, she whacked him over the head with fry pans many times. It got to the point where when he allowed her to live in his house, he had to wear a helmet because she was doing that. Like I said, I'll be making movies about this. The woman is a genuine wacko, man. The pictures you see of her online, they've all been doctored up. You say, this doesn't make any sense. Why would she be like this? She's a Roman Catholic agent. Personal opinion, I think she's demon possessed. That's what I think. And when I portray her in my movies, I get into character imagining myself as a demon possessed person because I feel that is the most accurate way to play that part. Because when I dealt with her at the Quebec trial, I got to know her pretty good, and I'm 100% convinced she's demon possessed. Okay, you can get glimpses of the relationship that I had with Brent Spiner in my novel, Silver Skies, because I wrote that novel for Brent Spiner. It was my way of trying to make up to him that I couldn't give him my body, that morally I couldn't do it. And so I poured my soul and my heart into Brent Spiner and everything that I wrote for him, everything I did, and he loved it. And he did the same for me. You may say, well, Brent Spiner at this video says he's never, what do you say about this video where Brent Spiner claims he's never talked to you ever? Yes, he's telling the truth. You say, what? What? That's because he's not Brent Spiner. That guy who looks like Brent Spiner, who has Brent Spiner's voice, is his clone. He's not lying. When he says he's never talked to me and never communicated with me, he's telling the truth because he's not the real Brent Spiner. The real Brent Spiner has communicated with me. Brent Spiner has a clone. This is what I'm talking about, like hard to believe futuristic technology. Yeah, he's telling the truth because he's the clone. You say, well, how do you know he's a clone? How can you be so sure he's not the real Brent Spiner? Brent Spiner has been in my life since 1990. And I've practically devoured his soul. That's why I wrote books to put him in there. I know him. I know every inner crevice of his soul, practically. This clone, when I look in his eyes, he lacks the sensitivity, the depth, and the deep spirituality of my Brent Spiner. The real Brent Spiner, the one who played Data in Star Trek The Next Generation. Laurie McBride drug raped Brent in order to destroy his relationship with me. Like I said, I came first, she came next, and she forced her way in using drug rape because she knew he loved me so much. That was the only way she could destroy our relationship. And then once she got in, when Brent went to Paramount Studios to complain about her, and I'll be going into this in my movie, Paramount took her side over Brent's. They said, Brent, if you don't cooperate with her, we will report you as a rapist to the media. And that's how they got Brent's cooperation. And then LeVar Burton, when Laurie tried to attack him one time and she tied him up to a bed, and then LeVar Burton came behind her and whacked her out and then took her out to a dumpster, he actually killed her. Now, this is kind of hard to believe. I'm going to be going into this in my movie. And he burned her up in a big bonfire outside the Paramount Studios. And they say, this is what Brent told me. And I know this sounds hard to believe. You say, how could he have killed her if she's still around? This is why I'm saying there are such things as clones. Well, but Brent didn't know about that back then. He didn't believe in clones in 1992. So after she died, you may say, they're going to get him for murder. This was self-defense, folks. Like I told you, she put him in stitches. LeVar did this to save his friend's life. So it was self-defense. And then Brent was so relaxed. That's why in November 92, when he went on the Joan Rivers show, and he seemed really happy, I said, Brent, why were you so happy with Laurie McBride drug raped you in September 1992? Why were you so happy on the Joan Rivers show and joking about how you had sex on the episode and all this? And Brent said, it's because I thought that Laurie McBride was dead and that she couldn't bother me anymore. Well, very shortly after that Joan Rivers episode, she came back and she showed up, and Brent went, ah. He about died when he saw her again. He thought, oh my God, this woman, you can't even kill her. She came back, and he didn't believe in clones back then, but because he saw her again, and then she discreetly went to Paramount, and Paramount Studios actually called Brent and said, we think it's about time you acknowledge your new girlfriend. Here this woman was repeatedly drug raping Brent Spiner, and they took her side, and he basically allowed her to have public girlfriend status because if not, Paramount Studios threatened to give him bad press, claiming that he was a rapist if he wouldn't take her on as his girlfriend. She drug raped him. Like I said, future movies, I'm going to be going into this. Laurie McBride is a Roman Catholic, Jesuit, Vatican agent. Her job is to destroy Brent Spiner's relationship with me, and she's done a pretty respectable job of that. But except there's only one problem. The love between Brent and I is so unusual, she hasn't been able to do it, and Jesus Christ has been helping us out too. This guy who uploaded this video by this Brent Spiner clone, I asked him, I said, everybody tries to say that I'm crazy, and they never deal with the issue that I bring up when I talk about Jack Chick's smoke screens, how the Roman Catholic Church was behind the Nazi Holocaust. They financed and supported Hitler's war machine. I said, why are we hearing about this? See, you guys have to discredit me as crazy because you don't want it to be known that the Roman Catholic Church sponsored and financed the Nazi war machine, and they're trying to do this again in the United States. So they've got to knock me out as crazy so that I don't get in their way. I said, why aren't we hearing about this? It makes me suspect you're a Jesuit agent when you don't discuss that part of my videos. They got to focus on the stuff that makes me appear crazy so they can discredit me, so nobody will believe that I'm telling the truth, that the Roman Catholic Church was behind the Nazi Holocaust. I'll be right back. Hold on. I said, explain to me why you're not dealing with this. So I showed these pictures. These are Roman Catholic soldiers, devout Roman Catholics. Adolf Hitler was a son of the Roman Catholic Church. These are all Roman Catholics, decorated for their heroic Eustachi deeds. So I asked this guy, I said, why aren't you discussing Jack Chick's smokescreens, huh? Makes me suspect you're a Jesuit agent. You're just putting stuff up there to make me appear crazy so nobody will listen to me about this. He wrote a very kind, polite letter to me and said that we could get, he said, for your information, Gail, you can get this for free. And he mentioned a Google site online where you could do it. And I went and checked his site out. You know what? When I went and looked at the smoke screens that was up on that screen, it was missing pages, and it was missing all of the concentration camp pictures. So, folks, if you want to get the unadulterated version of Smoke Screens by Jack Chick, you need to go to chick.com, chick.com, or maybe go to my website and listen to the tape there. Also, there's a tape of smoke screens up at Google and YouTube that seems to be pretty complete, but it doesn't have the pictures. The Jesuits hate those pictures because that's photographic evidence that they sponsored the Nazi war machine and they were behind the Holocaust. They're very anti-Semitic, these Jesuits. Which, by the way, Brent Spiner is Jewish, and Laurie McBride is an anti-Semitic Jesuit. Pretty strange couple there, huh? Both Brent and I are Jewish. I'm half King David. I'd say Laurie McBride and Brent Spiner are a pretty strange couple there. This Jewish man likes an anti-Semitic Jesuit. Too many inconsistencies, folks, here. Yeah, but if it doesn't make sense, there's a buck in it. Tuh. Or a Jesuit conspiracy in it. Anyways, I know this is rather long, but I had a lot to cover. Jesuits have been real busy, so I had to cover a lot of bases, but you need to go to chick.com if you want to see smoke screens with all those pictures that the Jesuits omitted. They're trying to make this free online because so that people will not spend money to buy the book and see those pictures. That's why.